Welcome to Psyche Talks. Today we're embarking on a really fascinating exploration into this concept called flow.
Mm-hmm.
That feeling of being completely absorbed in what you're doing. It's also known as the psychology of optimal experience. And it's largely inspired by the work of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
That's right, a foundational figure.
Absolutely. And you, our listener, have shared some great material exploring how this state, this flow state, can lead to a more joyful, maybe more meaningful life.
Definitely.
So our goal today is really to unpack what flow truly is,
Mm.
why it matters, and maybe most importantly, how you can cultivate more of these experiences in your own life.
Right, without getting overwhelmed by, all the complex psychological theory.
Exactly. Think of this as your express route, your shortcut to understanding a powerful way to live a more engaged, maybe more fulfilling existence.
It's really interesting, isn't it, how the human search for happiness has always been there. I mean, Aristotle, way back, he thought it was the ultimate goal.
The highest good, yeah.
But the sources you've shared point to this paradox almost. When we try to grab happiness directly,
It slips away.
it often slips through our fingers, yeah. Like J.S. Mill pointed out, the moment you stop and ask, am I happy?
Poof, it's gone.
The feeling's probably already vanished. It's like, yeah, trying to catch a shadow.
Okay, so this shadow chasing idea, if going straight for happiness doesn't really work, what's the alternative? I know Viktor Frankl has something to say about this.
He did a really powerful perspective. He basically said, don't aim for success or happiness itself. The more you aim at it, the more you're going to miss it.
So it's a byproduct.
Exactly. It seems that genuine happiness, that sort of deep-seated well-being, it often just emerges. It arises when we're fully immersed in our lives, the good bits and the bad.
Right, just involved in the detail.
Precisely. And that, I think, brings us right to the heart of it.
Hmm.
Optimal experience.
Yep.
Flow.
Okay.
And the sources, they paint such vivid pictures, don't they? A sailor feeling at one with the wind and the sea.
Yeah.
A painter totally lost in the colors, bringing something to life on canvas. Or even a parent just captivated by their baby's first smile.
You can almost feel that intensity in those descriptions.
You can. And these moments, they resonate because they share something. A sense of mastery, maybe, or active participation.
Yeah.
And just this profound enjoyment. It feels a lot like happiness, but maybe purer somehow.
Yeah, that sense of being completely present, like nothing else exists in that moment. And it's not just about being good at something, is it? It's more about being completely involved.
That's a great way to put it. Involves in creating the moment. These are the experiences we just instinctively recognize as deeply satisfying.
So who experiences this? Is it just, elite performers?
Well, what's really interesting is the range. Csikszentmihalyi's early work, yes, it did focus on experts.
Yeah.
Artists lost in their work, athletes totally in sync.
Musicians, surgeons?
Right. Chess masters seeing moves ahead. These were the people who helped us first understand the phenomenon. They were kind of the pioneers.
Okay, but here's where it gets really exciting for me. It didn't stop there, did it? The sources emphasize how this idea of flow has rippled outwards.
Oh, absolutely. It's influenced thinking in so many different fields. Psychology, obviously, but also sociology, anthropology.
Wow.
People have even used the lens of flow to try and understand things like human evolution or the nature of religious experience.
So it's moved beyond the lab, beyond academia.
Definitely. The theory has translated into very practical applications, things aimed at actually enhancing our daily lives. The material you sent lists a whole range: education, business strategies, how we approach leisure time, even things like psychotherapy, physical rehabilitation, designing museum exhibits to be more engaging, occupational therapy. It's broad.
That really suggests there's something fundamental going on here, doesn't it? Something that cuts across all these different human activities.
I think so. It points to a core aspect of positive human experience.
So what's the engine behind it? What makes flow actually happen? The sources talk about ordering consciousness. Okay, let's try and unpack that.
Right. Order and consciousness. At its core, this optimal inner state happens when our mental energy, our attention, basically is focused on realistic, achievable goals.
Okay.
And crucially, when our skills are pretty well matched to the challenges the activity presents, think of it like tuning an instrument not too tight, not too loose.
The Goldilocks zone, that sweet spot. Not so hard you feel overwhelmed and anxious,
Right.
but not so easy you get bored.
Exactly. And the sources point out something really fascinating here. The actual effort involved in overcoming those challenges while you're striving towards the goal. That's often where the deepest enjoyment lies.
That seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Effort usually feels like, well, Effort.
It does, but think about it. That effort means you're engaged, you're focused, you're making progress. It's active.
Okay, I see.
And this active investment of our psychic energy, as the material calls it, into goals we've consciously chosen. It doesn't just create these enjoyable moments, it actually fuels our personal growth.
How so?
Well, by constantly pushing our skills, stretching them to meet slightly higher challenges, we become more complex individuals, more capable, more adaptable.
Better equipped to handle, whatever life throws at us.
Precisely. And ultimately, as we start integrating all these experiences, weaving them into a kind of meaningful pattern in our lives, that's when the external stuff, like wealth or status, starts to seem less important.
Because you had this internal sense of mastery.
Exactly. That internal sense of control and fulfillment reduces our reliance on those external shields, as the sources call them, that society often provides.
Right. And the sources do talk about why happiness is so hard to achieve sometimes. It mentions the universe wasn't exactly designed for our comfort.
No, it wasn't. The sheer scale, the apparent randomness, it can be chaos, essentially.
Hmm.
And so cultures develop myths, beliefs, stories.
To give us a sense of meaning. A buffer.
Yeah, a sense of importance, security, a framework for success. But when those frameworks start to get questioned, maybe through science or just changing times,
Disillusionment can set in.
right, you see that listlessness, that anxiety, even in societies that are materially very prosperous.
And just trying to buy more things or gain more power doesn't really fix that underlying need, does it?
No, those external solutions often fall short. The sources really hammer this point. Genuine control comes from within. It's about managing our own experience, finding satisfaction moment to moment in what we're doing. That's what truly helps.
So if those traditional cultural supports aren't always enough anymore, what's the way forward? It sounds like it comes down to individual responsibility,
Yes, very much so. Taking personal responsibility for creating a meaningful and enjoyable life.
which means
Well, it involves becoming more independent, not just from social pressures, but also, interestingly, from the immediate dictates of our own body's pleasure, pain, and crucially, learning to actually control what happens in our minds.
learning to steer our own consciousness.
Exactly. Engagement, boredom, focus, distraction. These are all states within consciousness that we can learn to influence.
And this ability, this control, it's not something you can just read in a book and instantly have, is it? The sources make an interesting point about it not being cumulative knowledge in the usual sense.
That's right. It's not like science, where each generation builds directly on the last. This kind of wisdom, it seems, needs individual trial and error. It has to be lived.
And constantly reformulated for the current culture.
Yes, past wisdom is valuable, of course, but it might lose some of its direct power or need reinterpretation when transplanted to a completely different time and place.
Which brings up that sort of paradox about self-control itself.
Yeah.
Sometimes society values it highly, other times it's seen as, restrictive.
Trends shift. But regardless of those societal views, the sources consistently suggest that people who actively work on mastering their inner world, on ordering their consciousness, they just tend to live happier, more fulfilled lives.
So understanding how our own consciousness works is pretty crucial then.
Fundamental, I'd say.
Okay, let's get a bit more into the mechanics. Consciousness as an information processor. A filter.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. It's constantly selecting what's relevant from this massive flood of input, sensations, feelings, memories, ideas.
And allows us to respond deliberately, not just react.
Precisely. And even to generate new information, new ideas, new connections. And developing willpower, the ability to direct our attention where we want it to go, that's key to bringing order to this whole process. For enjoyment, yes, but also for achieving anything, really.
Because our attention is limited. It's a finite resource.
Exactly. And we're either focusing it intentionally, like a spotlight, or it's just sort of diffusing randomly, drifting.
And how we consistently choose to invest that attention, that shapes our reality.
It absolutely shapes our subjective reality. I mean, even terms we use like extrovert or introvert or pathologically like paranoid, you could see those as reflecting habitual patterns of where someone invests their attention.
Interesting. And what about the self? We tend to think of it as just us, our body, maybe.
Right. But the sources suggest thinking of the self more as a A dynamic mental representation. It symbolizes all the contents of our consciousness, our goals, our memories, our relationships, and how they all connect.
So it's not fixed, it changes.
It's constantly being constructed and reconstructed, and it plays a huge role in directing our attention and interpreting our experiences. It's like the CEO of our inner world, deciding where the resources go.
Okay, so if that's the self, what happens when things go wrong internally? The sources mention psychic entropy. Sounds chaotic.
It is. Psychic entropy is that state of disorder in consciousness. It's when information conflicts with our goals or our attention is scattered. Think anxiety, fear, jealousy, boredom, frustration, a lack of purpose.
That feeling when your mind is just buzzing with negativity or feels completely flat.
Exactly. It's when our psychic energy isn't being used effectively or it's blocked.
Yeah.
And the antidote to that internal chaos, that's flow.
Ah, okay. So flow is the opposite of psychic entropy.
Precisely. Flow is optimal experience. It's a state of order where we feel in control of our mental energy and our actions are aligned with our goals, adding coherence and strength to our sense of self.
So let's nail down the ingredients. How do we actually get into flow? What does an activity need to have?
Okay, the sources outline several key components, kind of a checklist for flow-inducing activities. First, clear goals. You need to know what you're trying to do, even if the goal is self-imposed.
Right. Makes sense.
Second, immediate feedback. You need to be able to tell, moment by moment, how you're doing. Are you getting closer to the goal?
You can adjust as you go.
Exactly. Third, a balance between the perceived challenges and your perceived skills. That Goldilocks zone again.
Not too hard, not too easy.
Fourth, concentration and focus become possible, almost effortless. The activity kind of filters out distractions naturally.
Okay.
Fifth, because of that focus, the worries and frustrations of everyday life temporarily disappear. You're fully absorbed.
Like an escape, but a productive one.
Sort of. Sixth, there's a sense of personal control or agency over the situation, even if the overall outcome is uncertain.
You feel like you're driving.
Yes. Seventh, and this is interesting, your concern for yourself, your self-consciousness, tends to disappear during the activity. You merge with the action.
You lose yourself in it.
But paradoxically, you often emerge from the experience with a stronger, more defined sense of self.
Huh. Okay. And lastly,
Your sense of time becomes altered. It might speed up hours, feel like minutes, or sometimes slow down, where moments feel stretched.
wow, that's quite a list. It sounds like a really heightened state of being.
It is. And the sources suggest that many activities humans have developed over centuries. Games, sports, art, music, rituals might have been, perhaps unconsciously, designed precisely to provide these kinds of experiences, to enrich life.
But it's not just limited to those big things, right? You mentioned transforming routine tasks.
Absolutely. That example of Professor Meyer Leibniz is perfect.
Ah.
Stuck in boring lectures, he invented a little mental finger-tapping game, setting himself challenges.
Just to stay engaged.
Exactly. He created an internal challenge, introduced goals and feedback into a mundane situation, and found a way to maintain focus and avoid that psychic entropy of boredom. It shows we can create flow opportunities.
So it really boils down to finding or creating that balance between boredom on one side and anxiety on the other.
That seems to be the crucial boundary. Enjoyment lies right there, where the challenges match our capacity to act.
And when you're in it, you're just doing, not constantly second-guessing.
Precisely. You're so absorbed that questioning why you're doing it doesn't even come up. Action just flows into the next action seamlessly.
Even for long-term things, like, say, gardening, the feedback isn't immediate there.
Good point. But even there, the goals are clear, healthy plants, maybe vegetables. And the feedback, while slower, is still there, seeing growth, noticing changes, responding to pests. That ongoing feedback loop is still crucial for maintaining engagement.
And what counts as useful feedback is really personal, isn't it? Like a surgeon looks for different cues than a therapist.
Totally. It depends on your goals, your skills, your whole way of interpreting the world. What signifies progress is subjective.
And during flow, all the background noise of life just fades.
It really does seem to. Everyday worries, frustrations, deadlines, they recede. The activity becomes this self-contained world demanding your full attention.
And that sense of control, even if it's just the potential for control, like in a game of chess or a sport, that's really rewarding.
Hugely rewarding. That feeling of exercising your skills, making decisions, influencing the situation, even if you don't ultimately win, can be incredibly satisfying.
I can see why it could become addictive, as the sources mention. That feeling of order and control is a powerful contrast to the messiness of normal life.
It really is. It offers a temporary, structured escape from that everyday entropy.
Now, you mentioned distinguishing flow from other kinds of immersion. What about things like, say, being part of a very intense group or movement?
Right. The sources touch on this. Some systems, like maybe fundamentalist religions or certain mass movements, can offer a kind of self-transcendence through total immersion. You lose yourself in the group's goals and actions.
But is that the same as flow?
Not necessarily in the same way that fosters individual growth. The sources suggest that for true enjoyment, even within such systems, there need to be real opportunities for individual actions, skill development, non-trivial challenges. Otherwise, it might be more about conformity than flow.
Got it. And that warped sense of time.
Mm.
It just adds to the intensity, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's part of what makes the experience feel so different, so outside of ordinary life, that feeling of being utterly involved.
But getting to that point, especially in complex activities, takes work, right? It's not always instant.
Oh, definitely not. The sources emphasize that achieving flow in things like playing a complex musical piece or high-level chess or scientific research often requires years of dedicated practice. Building skills.
So the aha moment might feel sudden, but there's a lot underneath it.
Exactly. And trying to force someone into an activity they're not prepared for, where the challenge vastly outweighs their skill, that can backfire badly. It can lead to lasting dislike or feelings of failure.
But when it works, when the experience is intrinsically rewarding, meaning the reward is the activity itself.
Then life feels justified in the present moment. You're not just doing something to get something else later. The doing is the reward.
Which is a pretty profound shift in perspective.
It really is. Now, there's a caveat, an important one. The experience of flow itself, that feeling of absorption and control, isn't inherently good morally.
What do you mean?
Well, the sources point out that even destructive or cruel activities can potentially induce a state of flow for the person doing them. Think of vandalism, or even certain kinds of combat.
Right, so the feeling itself is neutral. It's the activity that carries the value.
Precisely. But the kinds of activities that typically foster flow, creating, learning, mastering skills, helping others, these tend to be inherently transformative in a positive way.
How so? Transform?
They lead to a sense of discovery, they push us to higher levels of performance, they can open up new ways of seeing the world, new states of consciousness even. And crucially, they make the self more complex, more capable, more differentiated.
So the self grows through flow.
That's a key part of why it's so deeply rewarding. It's not just fun, it's developmental.
And culture plays a role here too, setting up the game, so to speak.
Yes, culture provides many of the goals and rules, often arbitrary if you look closely, that allow flow to happen on a larger scale. Think of sports, religious practices, artistic traditions.
So a culture can be better or worse at facilitating flow for its members.
It seems so. A culture that provides accessible, goal-oriented activities and encourages skill development might enhance flow for many people. But again, as the sources note, enhancing flow doesn't automatically make a culture morally superior.
It's interesting too, that link, or lack of link, between wealth and happiness.
Yes, the finding that material wealth doesn't reliably predict happiness ratings is striking. It really does suggest that access to optimal experiences, to flow, might be a much bigger piece of the life satisfaction puzzle.
Which leads to that paradox of leisure time. We have more of it, but we're not necessarily happier.
Right. It's odd, isn't it? People often report experiencing flow more often at work, where goals are clearer and challenges are often present, than during passive leisure, like watching TV.
Why is that? What stops us from finding flow in our free time?
Well, the sources mention several obstacles. Sometimes it's stimulus over-inclusion, just being unable to filter out distractions in our environment.
Information overload.
Yeah. Or excessive self-consciousness, constantly worrying about how we appear, or being too self-centered, focused only on our own feelings. And attentional disorders obviously make sustained focus difficult.
But some people seem naturally better at finding flow, even in tough situations. The autotelic personality.
Yes, that's the term Csikszentmihalyi uses. Autotelic means finding rewards in the activity itself. These individuals seem to have an ability to reframe challenges, to set their own goals, pay close attention to feedback, and find enjoyment even in difficult circumstances. They make their own flow.
They turn hardship into a manageable struggle.
Exactly. They actively structure their consciousness. And this ability isn't just for challenging situations. They can find flow in solitude, too.
Oh.
By learning to direct their attention inwardly, engaging in activities like reading, thinking, writing, hobbies, they don't necessarily need external stimulation to find engagement.
That sounds like a valuable skill.
Immensely valuable, and think about applying that mindset to relationships, making our interactions more like flow experiences, shared goals, listening for feedback, genuine engagement.
That could really improve things.
Significantly, the quality of our work and our relationships are huge factors in overall well-being.
So this autotelic self, it's resilient.
Very resilient, it translates potential threats into enjoyable challenges, maintains inner harmony. The key traits seem to be setting clear goals, immersing yourself, paying attention, learning to enjoy the immediate experience, and being sensitive to feedback.
And this all ties into finding meaning in life.
Deeply. Finding meaning often involves integrating our actions, our lives, into a unified flow experience, usually driven by some kind of challenging, overarching goal or purpose that gives significance to the everyday stuff.
Like a theme for your life.
Kind of, yeah. A unifying purpose acts like a magnetic field for our psychic energy. It defines the challenges we need to face, the skills we need to develop to transform life itself into a kind of long-term flow activity. Without purpose, even if your consciousness is ordered moment to moment, life can lack that deeper sense of meaning.
And historically, cultures provided those big purposes.
Often, yes. Religions, ideologies, national identities. They offered encompassing meaning systems that helped people order their goals. The sources mention different types, like sensate cultures focused on material well-being, or ideational ones focused on spiritual concepts.
But just committing to a goal, any goal, and its rules can help create meaning and flow, even if the choice feels limited.
It seems so. Commitment itself brings order. While modern life offers incredible freedom and choice, that can sometimes lead to paralysis or a feeling that no single choice matters that much. Commitment, even to something chosen from limited options, can focus our energy.
So if there aren't obvious, universally accepted purposes handed to us anymore, what then?
Then, the sources suggest it becomes a personal quest, a journey of trial and error, intense self-reflection, and cultivation to discover, or perhaps create, one's own ultimate purpose. Self-knowledge is absolutely critical here.
It's almost like the evolution of consciousness itself created this challenge. More capacity means more potential for conflict.
That's an interesting point the sources raise. As our minds became more complex, capable of holding conflicting ideas and goals, the potential for inner disorder, psychic entropy increased. Maybe simpler cultures, less burdened by complex choices or external threats, experienced a kind of baseline serenity that looks a bit like flow.
And individuals find their own way by developing these life themes, finding meaning in their own story.
Yes, often by interpreting personal experiences, even suffering, in a way that leads to positive action, a sense of direction, maybe contributing to something larger, finding a narrative that gives purpose.
It really puts the future in our hands, doesn't it? The evolution of consciousness.
It does. The sources conclude on that note, humanity's advances in consciousness differentiation mean the future path of evolution is increasingly up to us. Cultivating flow, mastering our inner experience, isn't just about personal happiness, it's about contributing to a more complex, enriched, and hopefully more positive future.
So as you, the listener, reflect on all this, these ideas about flow, maybe consider how you can intentionally bring more of these elements into your own life.
Things like setting clearer goals, even for small tasks, really focusing your attention.
Finding that balance between challenge and skill. Maybe transforming some routine tasks. Or picking up a new interest where you can really engage your mind and body.
Yeah.
Because this deep dive really shows that a more fulfilling life isn't about just passively waiting for happiness to show up.
No, it's about actively creating the conditions for it.
Yeah.
Consciously engaging with the world, ordering your own experience.
Thank you for your support and for listening.